I think the Badlands is a prime example of the huge breadth of range which Cyberpunk 2077 has to offer. The different districts of Night City may vary in which gangs operate where, but out in the deserty wastes, sometimes you could feel you'd stepped into a whole different game. Sure, much of it may be just empty and barren, but it's still one of my favourite regions of the Cyberpunk world in its feel alone. And some of the gigs on offer here really are fun and connect with a lot of other elements back in Night City. So without further ado, let's dive straight in to exploring all 9 gigs of the Badlands. The gig Flying Drugs takes place in a train station similar to the With a Little Help from My Friends Al Decaldo mission, difference being that this one is inhabited by wraiths. Now, as far as gameplay is concerned, it's actually pretty straightforward. Wraiths are intercepting drone shipments from Dakota's friend Mosquito, with all of them disappearing at this station. Our job is to infiltrate the base, find out why, and put a stop to it. It's without a doubt a decent stealth opportunity, this one, with tons of shipping containers to hide behind before peeking out and uploading short circuits. Or, you could give yourself more of a challenge if you want to. I'm just here to explore the details of the gig and discover any hidden secrets, which may exist if we look at this terminal on the bottom floor. First up, we have a message explaining the virus's origin, a communication between the ever-elusive netrunner named Bad and a wraith called Manny Quaid. Bad explains that the virus, when uploaded to an antenna, has the power to cut propulsion systems of specified drones. Therefore, the wraiths have the power to take out Mosquito's illegal drones without knocking everything else, such as Militech ones, out of the sky. Ingenious. And if we switch over to the files, we can see that the virus is called Killer, with 1s and 3s for L's and E's, and the code itself being an assortment of letters, symbols, and interestingly, no numbers. To complete the gig, we then have to head to the roof and take out the large antenna. This can either be done with 10 tech to silently disable it, or shooting the thing and blowing it up, which if you're trying to do this stealthily, will alert the base. But back to the terminal for a second. Now, I did some digging on both the characters Manny Quaid and Bad, and here's what I came up with. Manny is clearly a wraith leader with one other communication, which we'll come to later. However, his physical presence in the game is seemingly non-existent as of 1.62, unless maybe he's a random, barely specified NPC somewhere. And the only thing I can think of that he might be a reference to is Douglas Quaid from Total Recall. Who knows? As for Bad, now that's a little more interesting. I've touched on one gig involving Bad before, back in the Northside video, but in summary, Bad never shows up physically in the game as far as we know, but there are a ton of Bad references on different messages, scanner hustles, and terminals about the place. They definitely deserve their own theory video, so I won't delve too deep here. This is a gigs video after all, but what's clear is that Bad is a well-known, mysterious netrunner who clearly isn't adverse to doing business with the likes of the wraiths. As for the killer virus code itself, now that, well, first up I tried cross-referencing it with any existing codes, and according to our AI overlords, it doesn't match with, well, anything. The trail might run cold here as to this having any further meaning, but please share your theories or any extra details in the comments. Anyway, leaving the station, Dakota will call, telling V they know how to use their head and congratulating you on a job well done. I'm going to congratulate the gig itself for making it to the B for Bad tier. Here's a fun little challenge over in the Vasquez Pass region of the Badlands, extracting a Thornton Galena Gecko car from the middle of a minefield. These mines serve as a remnant of past wars and now act as a convenient protective measure between Night City's surrounding wastes and the rest of California. You want to be careful going in with this one. Most of the mines are fairly visible, though some aren't, and there's definitely no surviving an exploding car. In fact, my game completely glitched out once when I had the second heart, leaving me alive but immobilized in a wrecked vehicle. I'd recommend proceeding on foot to the Gecko, either disabling, detonating, or just avoiding the mines along the way. Once we reach the car, we'll also discover its previous occupants. Here's what Johnny has to say about their fate.
Another gonk who thought fate smiled on him.
He's probably smiling himself before he OD'd on Maelstrom's shipment.
This is what you get for sampling Maelstrom's supply. Strongest shit out there. Nothing else that could fire up their burnt-out synapses. Poor bastard. His output's probably out in Albuquerque, waiting, unaware little Jiro's brain turned to jelly.
The tragedy of this guy is clearest though when we read his archived conversation. Turns out this was supposed to be the guy's last run. What a classic. Then him and Simona could have settled down for a happy life together. Too bad he seemingly got the stupid urge to sample whatever it is Maelstrom take then, else no doubt he'd have made it through this minefield with no issues like so many times before. Sad. But as we jump in the Gecko and start to navigate our way back out, Militech decide now is finally the time to venture into this dangerous territory and put an end to all this smuggling. Too bad they've A, come across the most OP merc in Night City, and B, ventured into a place where it's all too easy to make their demise look like a total accident. There can be no witnesses. What's that there? They've pulled over another Gecko? Well, ain't no way this innocent nomad is going to be taking the fall for me. Let's Control-Alt-Delete this guy and let this dude know he's safe now.
We have a saying, catch you on the trail.
Oh, and no witnesses. All that out the way, let's finish traversing the desert in this brilliant off-road car before handing it in to Dakota. Pretty cool that we're actually completing the gig at her base of operations. I wonder if she'll thank us in person. Oh, no, too lazy to step out her office and shake our hand, and in fact, she's locked the door. I guess everyone really has become afraid of IRL business meetings by 2077. In spite of that, the uniqueness of this gig in question, despite being basic, is another B tier, in my opinion. Iris Tanner is a member of the Aldecaldos working as a techie who as a rule does not work with fixers. Surprise surprise then when Dakota calls us up with a job to rescue Iris from the Wraiths. They're holding her out in some camp on the edge of that giant trash heap in the Badlands, and suffice it to say, she isn't exactly free to come and go as she chooses. In terms of how we get to her, I'd recommend approaching from the northwest rather than the northeast. The place is rigged with landmines that way, and there are more guards. When you reach her and take out her personal guard, she'll explain that not only does she want freedom, but she also wants us to break out her teched up Columbus van too. This throws a spanner in the works because driving out the front door in that will no doubt alert the remaining Wraiths. Luckily, we're V, the most OP merc in Night City, and in a couple more minutes we've stealthily, or not so stealthily, taken out the remaining guards. This guy actually has an archived convo as well, explaining how Iris got into this mess. Turns out that it's her stubbornness not to work with fixers that's to blame. The lack of an added fixer fee for clients makes her a cheaper mechanic than anyone else, whilst making it less likely she'll be rescued should things go awry. We can also find some of her notes for the work she's done for previous clients behind where we originally found her. Anyway, with nothing left to discover here, let's head off with her van back to Dakota. And wow, finally we are actually allowed in with Iris to see Dakota in person at the end of the gig. And we're awarded a decent sum too. Not only that, but because we returned Iris's ride in one piece, she's prepared to offer us a special bonus, which we can claim from the Sunset Motel. Let's head over there and finish this thing. As an extra special thanks, she's given us, a common tier Achilles and a crunch mod. Thanks Iris, love it. What a great gift. Thank you. This is going right up with my C tier ranking on account of the fact that you should be expanded upon more as a character because you're quite interesting, but aren't. Let's do another gig. Trevor Brass was a young, naive Aldecaldo who believed that profiting from a deal with the Wraiths would work out in his favour. Fatal mistake for the poor boy, and now our mission is to break into the Wraith camp housing Trevor's body, recover it, and return it to his parents for a proper burial. Wraiths, by the way, are known to profit from repurposing human body parts, so Trevor himself was an added bonus in addition to the items he was trying to trade. The Wraiths really are one of the greatest hives of scum and villainy in Cyberpunk as far as I'm concerned, and I really have no qualms in taking these guys out once and for all. But first, we have to get inside. The front entrance is too heavily guarded, but around to the right is a little hidden tunnel we can crawl through. A perfect position to start eliminating these villains one by one. Inside this first building, we can learn a bit more about what exactly went down here. So turns out that Trevor had recovered something from the downed AV. No doubt the same Kang Tao one that we took down a while ago. At first, the Raffens ask for the location of the Aldecaldo camp, and well, at least Trevor isn't that stupid. He knows that the Wraiths are looking for this particular product and is hoping to make a little cash off of finding it first. The message ends with Old Boyd, the Wraith leader, saying, quote, "Well then, Trevor from the Aldecaldos, come on. Collect your own prize." End quote. Clearly not creeped out enough for his own good, Trevor still went, and on the terminal over here, we can read about a fresh implant in stock from an Aldecaldo boy. Let's follow this bread trail a little further. Old Boyd is attempting to sell this new item to somebody called Chucks. Nobody by that name I know of in Cyberpunk, but one of the Ripperdocs is named Charles Bucks, and during the last login gig in Kabuki, we learn that Charles is indeed procuring cheap cyberware from the scavs. Ain't too much of a a stretch to believe he's working with the Wraiths too. So next time you think about taking his bribe for discounted cyberware, spare a thought for poor Trevor Brass and the other innocents who died for that man's business. Speaking of, Trevor is right at the end of the larger building of this encampment, but before you pick him up and go, players with 5 tech might want to search this back room. Inside, along with some actual treasures, lies a box of cybernetic arms, and personally, for lack of anything more fitting in this place, I'm gonna believe that this is what Trevor was trying to sell. Too bad. All that for a couple robot arms. At least now his parents can give him a proper burial, and we're paid $9K for our services. Dakota's happy, Trevor's parents are happier than before maybe, but most importantly, we've prevented this group of Wraith scum from ever doing this again. Heavy gig with some cool connections to the wider world makes this one a B+. Big Pete is the brother of Tiny Mike, whom we saved during the concrete cage trap gig in Kabuki. And if you want some nice bonus dialogue in this gig, I'd recommend you complete that one first. They say Big Pete's got big problems, though from what I can tell, and granted that's not everything, this man doesn't have big enough problems to warrant our assassination of him. It transpires that Big Pete sold a faulty jammer to someone, and because of the inconvenience incurred from that, the recipient in question wants revenge on Big Pete in a big way. Now, I've got a pretty solid theory as to who it was that ordered the hit here. If we head a little northeast from where this gig starts up into Laguna Bend, we can find a scanner hustle involving some Wraiths and a downed AV. Now, despite the fact that these guys have just crash landed and I'm approaching as a weary solo offering help, there's no way to stop them going aggro and attacking, which is a shame, but all you can really expect from the Wraiths. Reading the archived convo in the bag, we can learn that this vehicle went down because of some faulty Militech cloaking set up by none other than Big Pete. With the tech failing, the guys were attacked by drones and went down, but luckily survived. Well, that is until we came along. Now, as to whether the hit on Big Pete was ordered by either Michael Marcinkowski or Marley Anderson mentioned here, we'll never know for certain. But what is clear is that Big Pete's been ripping off several people with crappy tech, and maybe one of these two, maybe someone else, got a little overly pissed off at this. So here we are at the auto works to find and take out Big Pete. He'll be in the basement underneath, but in order to get to him, you'll first have to sneak past or fight several Wraiths. Make sure to head into this upstairs office first as well for some extra info. We can read an email between Big Pete and Tiny Mike, and this to me feels like a direct continuation of the thread we read during Mike's gig, Concrete Cage Trap. There, Pete already asked him for money, whilst here, he's resorted to now begging. This can also trigger an extra dialogue option with Pete when we confront him, wherein we call him out on having no money. He then insists that he does, and well, we'll get to that. Second, we can read an email with Manny Quaid, who I mentioned back in the Flying Drugs gig, and here Pete's attempting to sell him some tech that you quote-unquote won't lay eyes on. No doubt this is the faulty Militech cloaking gear, which was meant to hide the AV for Michael Marcinkowski. I love it how this game ties together sometimes. Now, when we confront Big Pete, he'll immediately try to reason for his life and offer to pay us if we let him live and leave Night City. There's 3 options here. We can refuse, kill him, and complete the gig as normal. Now, I kind of thought, I hoped, that this might trigger some angry, unique dialogue with Tiny Mike at the afterlife, but annoyingly, there's never any acknowledgement that we killed his brother. Equally, we can let him live, but refuse the bribe. There's certain scenarios, plenty of them, where refusing money is beneficial, but this isn't one of them. So, the best decision, in my opinion, is to let Pete live and pay us. Not only will we receive the job's payout from him, but Dakota will still consider the matter resolved and pay us too. Thus, we get double money, and not too measly an amount. Letting him live, as well in this case, opens up a new dialogue option with Tiny Mike. Mike seems pretty grateful and suggests making you the emergency contact for his entire family. I mean, come on, this has got to be a setup for a friend in the DLC, surely. After all, with Militech's heavy involvement, it wouldn't be surprising if Tiny Mike tagged along with us for a little part of it. Mind you, I don't know how they'd reconcile that with completing the Tiny Mike gig, to be fair, but who knows. Now, once the gig's done, you'll learn there's a secret back tunnel entrance to this place. Unfortunately, this door only opens one way, so no, you can't bypass the Wraiths and complete this gig super easily like Riders on the Storm. Oh, and you also can't accept Pete's bribe and then still kill him. The game won't let you, which I personally think is pointlessly unballsy. Either way, despite being a more basic gig in terms of its structure, I'm awarding it A tier, in lieu of the clear thought that's gone into it as a piece interwoven with other parts of the game. A fairly basic gig down in the Warbler Lake hazardous waste facility next involves procuring a training bot on behalf of a wannabe boxer, Red Joe. We can encounter one of these things ourselves very early in the game at V's apartment building, and fighting it is something of our initiation for the Beat on the Brat missions. This one has been scrapped after suffering a malfunction, but you know what they say, one man's junk is another man's treasure. Now this place is run by a junk vendor, which makes sense being a junkyard, and contrary to most gigs, we can straight up waltz on in here, speak to our man at the front desk, and request to buy the bots. Problem is, our guy way overshoots on the valuation of this thing, offering to par it off for no less than 31,000 eddies. Those with 12 cool can negotiate this down to 15k, but bear in mind the payout for this gig is only 14k, meaning either of those options result in a net loss for us. Equally, we can demand it for free, the vendor will close the shutter on us, and all the workers will aggro. This will never open again, and we'll lose a junk vendor. Not exactly a crying shame, I don't think I've ever visited this place outside of this gig, but purely in lieu of attaining the best outcome, let me show you how to get this bot and keep the vendor open as an option. You see, if we do pay for the bot, the van will be driven out to the front, where we can attain the shard that we need. But otherwise, all we have to do is sneak around the back here to where the van is otherwise located, and bear in mind this will be a hostile area, so you'd best incorporate some stealth to take out these guards, so as to not aggro everybody. You'll also be directed to the bot's exact location after reading this terminal in the garage on the right, where we can also learn here that Petrochem have a deal with this junkyard, wherein they regularly dispose of 40,000 gallons of hazardous material, seemingly off the books. Yep, the corruption of this city runs incredibly deep. We can also learn they've taken on the waste from a homeless settlement liquidation, and quite what that exactly means, I can only morbidly speculate. Anyway, with all that read, the last thing to do is sneak around to the back, where the training bot is being stored, clap its shard, and deposit it at the nearest drop a ways up the road. What confuses me is that we leave the bot behind and seemingly only want the software. I get that the bot's broken, but presumably they'd need another bot anyway to upload the software, which might render this activity obsolete, unless Red Joe is gonna source some other bot which happens to not have the software, or else train inside a brain dance like the Matrix, I don't know. Either way, despite the couple of approaches to this gig, including the utterly extortionate one which was clearly designed to be avoided, I'm gonna place it into D tier. It's perfectly fine, but wait, no, hold on, scrap that. Nope, I've just realized what this gig is a reference to. Yeah, the whole junkyard scrap boxing robot repurposed into something greater, the gig's a damn Real Steel reference. I love that movie, and for that alone, it's bumping it straight up to B+. The MIA gig involves rescuing a fellow merc named Benedict McAdams, who after his last mission seemingly disappeared with his getaway driver, appropriately named Jason Wilddriver. Fortunately, Benedict has GPS, so Dakota, not wanting to screw over one of her mercs, sends us to investigate. We'll come to some old building in the Biotechnica flats, and hiding behind here so Jason doesn't see us, we can actually listen in on his conversation.
No, not worth keeping him here.
Before we go further, let's get some context here. The gig in question, which Benedict was on his way back from, was an assassination job to take out one Councilman McLean. In fact, there's a body of some scaffolding in Arroyo right here of another merc who botched this same job. But on their body, we can read the details of said specific gig. Turns out that Councilman's full name is John McLean, which is the most parody name I've possibly ever heard. And as you'd expect, the guy had excellent security. I'm willing to bet that was some Militech level security, because after the gig is done, Militech have placed a price on Benedict's head. Too bad Jason Wilddriver isn't the honourable type of guy, because listening in on this conversation, it's abundantly clear that his plan is to turn Benedict over to Militech, and he's currently trying to negotiate his pay. Being an Aldecaldo, I'd have expected better from him, but there we go. Now, we can fight Jason here if we so wish, but be warned, the dude has a Cyber Psycho level boss health bar, and is a tougher fight than most generic enemies. Does that make him a Cyber Psycho? Well, down in West Winter State, during the scanner hustle where we take out Anton Kolev and get the more on Larby crafting spec, there's a very obscure terminal entry pertaining to the condition of Jason Wilddriver. He's in the market for an update to his Kuroshi optics since his are outdated and are causing issues with his vision. Now, the direct cause of cyberpsychosis is unknown, but the commonly adopted theory is that it boils down to different issues in different people and often relates to incompatibility between organic and cybernetic body parts. Therefore, for people who are too chromed up like David Martinez, going Cyber Psycho was an ultimate inevitability. Could Anton's outdated Kuroshi optics have caused him to lose sight of the bigger picture, and despite coming from a clan of honor then, turn on his duties to suit his own ends, having had his moral reasoning dampened by some form of cyberpsychosis? Well, I don't know for certain, but it's reason enough not to kill him in my opinion. Knocking him out though will give you another shard where we can read Jason's direct communications with Militech. However, personally I'm going to sneak past him, swipe this access key from the back room, and head into the cellar. Inside, sitting happily unchained, is Ben McAdams. Now, he has no reason to believe we're anyone other than Militech, and if we want, we can string this along for a minute, learning that Militech had bought off Councilman John McLean, and now that he's dead, they plan to use Benedict as a fall guy to stop the NCPD looking into John's shady dealings with them. Ha, right, as though the NCPD are a threat to anyone apart from upstanding citizens who put a toe out of line. Anyway, we can eventually tell the guy we're actually here on Dakota's behalf and swiftly get the hell out of there. Benedict isn't even restrained down in the cellar because Jason apparently respects the guy's bravery in the face of death act so much that he's treating the guy with a lot of respect. My theory is that honorable Aldecaldo Jason is fighting back against unhinged Cyber Psycho Jason, but that's just an idea. Head upstairs and our most straightforward escape is in Jason's Archer Quartz Sidewinder, a nice off-roader which we sadly can't own ourselves. Drive away from Jason and there's literally nothing he can do. Then park up by a nearby solar panel and wait. If this song is playing, then make sure you stay in the car until it's finished because, well, it's an awesome song. Fortunately, the new driver, another Aldecaldo named Starkey, seems to be old buddies with Benedict. Here's to hoping these two get on better than McAdams and Wild Driver. And it turns out they certainly did, because if you pick the Aldecaldo ending, we can once again meet Ben McAdams during the quest We Gotta Live Together. Overall, very nuanced gig. I like the characterization they gave Benedict, as well as the obscure details relating to Jason. And for these reasons, I award it an A+. Next up, we've got a gig that's called Radar Love, and it involves infiltrating one of the most security-heavy bases, not just in the Badlands, but also possibly Night City. The Sunshine Motel, which probably received fraudulent copyright strikes from the Sunset Motel and was forced to close down, has now been taken over by Militech. Inside, they're working on a new kind of radar technology, allowing them to track Aldecaldo transports across the Badlands, and in Dakota's words, disrupt the fragile ecosystem that exists out here. However, were some skilled enough merc to break in there, steal the vehicle housing the mobile radar station, and return it to Dakota, the Aldecaldos can use said tech to reverse engineer their own jammer, which can beat Militech's new tech, thus restoring the balance that the Badlands needs to effectively function. Try to take this one on stealthily if you dare, though I imagine by the time you get to this gig in the game, you should be more than equipped to take on even this entire Militech base in open combat. Use their turrets against them, or just fight classically from behind cover, and you'll be free to drive out in the convoy. Equally, if you've got all the bells and whistles like leg implants and optical camo, you can indeed reach this vehicle without alerting anyone. Then drive it out like a boss, whilst Militech look on and say this.
Literally nothing we can do.
We're gonna get a reputation.
There's something oddly satisfying about doing it this way. It's clean, it's sneaky, and with a base of this size, it's pretty funny. Mind you, before you do this, there's several pieces of info worth picking up about this place. So, up in this sort of office building with one soldier, through the window, we can read 2 field reports pertaining to the effect this radar tech has had since its inception. Apparently, the thing is 43% effective at detecting nomad activity, only encountering issues during sand and solar storms. Resultingly, Militech have been able to neutralize 17 smuggling vehicles and destroy 23 more. Big numbers. All this in spite of the fact of the number of error codes we can see the tech has. Also, down in this little office by the back gate, we can read a hilarious shard comparing the pros and cons of working for 5 Night City corporations. It makes ridiculous demands sound like amazing deals. Things like 50-year compulsory loyalty to a company and 80-hour working weeks. In fact, I might do a video in the future exploring which company is actually canonically probably best to work for in Night City. That could be interesting. Anyway, this one's a pretty standalone gig. It involves Militech, sure, but I've not encountered much else in reference to this jammer in particular out in the Badlands. Still, it's a more challenging one than most, and whilst I'm tempted to rank it A tier, I think it's going to be just about a B+ for me. Our final gig for this region is kind of appropriately named Goodbye Night City. It involves rescuing a smuggler named Bruce Welby from a Militech immigrant detention center down in Jackson Plains. In fact, it's quite the surprising backstory behind this one. You see, this job has been commissioned by none other than a Militech employee named Archibald Crane. Now, Militech betraying Militech is no rarity. We saw that with Meredith at the start of the game. But a Militech employee going out of their way for seemingly compassionate reasons to save a friend, that's rare amongst corpos. And clearly this isn't Archibald's first rodeo either. He seems to have worked multiple times with Dakota to help out people like Bruce here. In fact, CDPR have actually released a full profile on the guy, explaining that he grew up completely outside the corpo life, his father being a supplier for Night City's reconstruction in the 2030s, but Archibald turned to Militech purely to quote-unquote move with the times. Anyway, the gig itself comes with the optional objective to not kill any Militech soldiers. Makes sense, they're still Archie's guys after all, but I mean, so long as you equip some form of non-lethal mod, target analysis would be most straightforward, or just short-circuit everyone if you're a netrunner, it's kind of an easy task. Still, the method I always use is to enter through this gap round the right-hand side past these landmines, and slowly work my way through the base, non-lethally choking out everyone. Okay, I didn't clock how that line sounded when I wrote it, but we're gonna leave it in. Now, there's a couple computer terminals here wherein we can read about the other detainees in Militech custody. I don't recognize any of these names from elsewhere, but if any of you watching do, then please let everyone else know in the comments below. There's also a brief note about the first floor being in poor condition, which, yeah, and people getting berated for leaving authorization shards lying around, which, again, yeah. Beyond that though, not too much going on out here. One of the only shards we can find, in fact, is an archived convo of 2 Militech agents complaining that there's nothing going on out here. So with that said, let's find Bruce, steal a car, and get the hell out of here. Drive down into this valley and we'll be greeted by Archibald, who imparts the advice of being careful around the borders if we ever plan to leave Night City. Useful to remember, actually, when choosing the Aldecaldo ending, especially if you get that bloody glitch where you die literally following the mission and have to reload quite a previous save. Also, much like with Ben McAdams, if you do choose that ending, Bruce can similarly be found at the Aldecaldo camp and interacted with during We Gotta Live Together. Anyway, that was the final gig, so congratulations on unlocking the Thornton Mackinac Saguaro, an almost identical car to Claire's Beast, save for a little more yellow. As for this final gig, it's alright. Interesting concept, a compassionate Militech agent, but much like with Radar Love, there's really not that much to be discovered outside of the gig. Maybe there'll be further obscure connections with the addition of Phantom Liberty, but for now, it's just a B-. But the big question is, which is your favourite of these gigs and why? And are there any more connections you've found which I haven't made here? I know I missed a bunch of Lucy Thackeray details back in the Northside video, so thank you to everyone who pointed that out so quickly so I could bring it up again in the Pacifica edition. Anyhow, huge thanks to my patrons again for your amazing support of the channel. These hidden secret videos take a whole load more time and research than my usual stuff, and the support received from you guys is a huge help in allowing me to allocate the time needed to these longer videos. With that, I hope to see you in the next one, which should be Haywood. Thanks for watching, I'm Sam Brown, and I'll see you all soon in another video.